And it was really quite weird, because thereafter a sort of sense of calm came over me on the side of this road. Cara got out of the car, walked towards me. As you can imagine, it was a pretty horrific sight for what she saw. And I remember not a lot about it, but I do remember her telling me, or shouting at me a couple of times, to open my eyes. And because when she shouts, I do what she says, I did. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think I'm some weirdo or some crackpot. I'm a normal person who's doing hopefully a fairly responsible job normally within society. And what I'm telling you, and what I'd like you to take away from here is that I had that experience. And it was reinforced to me when 2.5 weeks later, when I was at Derriford, because I went downhill having been airlifted, and Cara was told by the air ambulance at the time, we're not taking him to Derriford Hospital in Plymouth, we're taking him to Trellis, because we don't think he's going to make it to Derriford. As I got to know, obviously, things over the next couple of weeks, I was starting to get flashbacks and things like that, which weren't very nice and very bad dreams. I asked to speak to the neurological, psychological, I'm saying that when you know, on a hot day. But the fact of the matter is, I asked to speak to him just to see what coping mechanisms you could have to deal with such stuff. In my job as a police officer, if you deal with trauma and things, you know you're going to get things like that. It's just flashbacks and things, but it was good to speak to him. And as he said to me, in his words, it's not words I would use, but you stared into the abyss, you stared into the other side and came back again. I actually think that God, or somebody from God's kingdom, spoke to me, gave me the choice, and I hung around because I still felt I had a lot to do here. And so, take it or leave it, but what I'm saying is, that's happened to me, so something is beyond. And it was a nice voice, it wasn't a horrible voice. So I'm hoping that it's the heaven side as opposed to the other side going down to heaven. Hell, sorry, not the hill. Going down the hill to hell would be. Okay. The other thing I'd just like to say, because I'm rabbiting on here and I don't want to take masses and masses of your time, but I want to get into the meat of what I'm talking about. You know who your friends are, actually, I've realised you know who your friends are when you don't hear from them when everything's going fine, but when it's not going fine, they're there for you and they come and see you and and support you and things like that. David and Jill have been fantastic over the last 9 weeks. They've been to visit me in the hospital and at home. David was just saying, I'm obviously getting better, because he popped round for about an hour, I think it was on Wednesday, and 3 hours later he left. So I was obviously starting to talk fairly well. But I'm really, really, well, I can't put it into words really, but thank you for all your assistance and help and your prayers and everybody's prayers, because I know, and I've been told that people have been praying all over the Penryn and Falmouth for me and the family, and I feel really humbled and honoured because of that. But you guys have been really, really, really helpful, chiefly. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. I also want to publicly thank, she's going to get embarrassed now, but Cara. It's been amazing. She dealt with me from the scene, and she's dealt with the children and me over the last 9 weeks. I bet I'm not the world's best patient, and I was certainly obviously very, very low at certain times. She's been brilliant, and I love you. So, crikey. What shall I talk about? I thought I'd pick it up on my testimony, if you like. What can I talk about? I discussed it with Cara. I thought, well, I could talk about heaven. And I thought, no, am I qualified to do that? I may have been partly there, but I didn't get there. Certainly not in the context that Des did. I commend you to read this book if you get the chance. Or shall I talk about death? Because I was very nearly there, and taking something from Revelations. Well, then I thought, no, I'm going to talk about the meaning of life and draw something from Ecclesiastes, but in the end, what I'm going to talk to you is what you've got written in front of you is, what would you do for a stranger? And the two reasons I want to talk to you about that. The first one is, because of what's happened to me over the last 9 weeks, I'm absolutely amazed at the number of cards that people sent me, and cards from, I'm probably not much over that one, cards from people that I haven't even met. And to me that's really amazing. People I don't know have sent me cards. And the other thing, and David messed it up actually on Wednesday a bit, because I had it all planned what I was going to talk about, and then as a result of what we were talking about, I've actually changed it to now what we're going to talk about today. And that was about inconveniencing yourself for 15 minutes a day. Now he tells me that your leadership team sort of talks about that. So that's effectively why I've changed what I'm going to talk about today. I felt that God wanted me to talk about something along that line. So, have you got your Bibles? If you haven't, can I commend to you that you bring them to church to start setting a trend. And it's really cool if you come along with your Bible, because you can have a look at it. But we're looking at Matthew 5, chapter 5, verses 38 to 42 that Cara just got stitched up to read, because I hadn't asked her before, about 5 minutes before. And you've also got some sort of morning notes there. So if you haven't got a copy, if you can try and have a look at a copy, it might help you. But at the top of the notes you'll see I've written a question. What would you do for a stranger? What would you do for a stranger? Would you lend them money if they asked you? Would you help an elderly person if they were wandering up the main part of Penryn town, up the hill there, struggling with their shopping? Or would you pick them up off the floor if they fell over? What would you do for a stranger who you didn't really know, was maybe one of your neighbours, and she constantly starts parking across your driveway? Or for the boys, I've got to be careful here because I don't want to tarnish people, but the guys and girls that you see driving around with really noisy exhaust music, really loud, and really after a while it really gets on your nerves. What would you do for them, for those people, those strangers? Would you be kind to them? Would you look after them if they needed to? Now we live in a world, of course, that says actually strangers don't matter. We're in it for ourselves, and you see it happen a lot, don't you, around you? We see the news almost on a daily basis, weekly basis, where, and I've seen it from my job, where groups of youths decide to confront each other. They don't know each other. A few words are said, punches start flying, and before you know it, one of them has fallen down, cracked their head and died. Results in death. We live in a world that's very territorial, and that basically says, I'm in it for me, I'm going to look after myself, and I'm going to get out of it what I personally can get out of it. And that's why the nation's press was so shocked when they, probably 3 or 4 years ago now, when Anthony Walker's mother said, I cannot hate, I have to forgive them. Hate is what killed Anthony. Now Anthony, if you can't remember, was that black lad, black young man in Liverpool who was murdered. And that's what Mrs. Walker, who was his mother, said about his murderers. As the Times newspaper stated at the time, the magnanimity of the gesture took the nation's breath away. Now there were radio phone-ins, TV interviews, polls asking how can anybody show such humanity to people that had done that to her son, to someone who buried a 2-foot mountaineering axe into her son's skull. She just said, I've got to forgive them. Well, the secret that enabled that lady to forgive like that and not lust, and to not lust after revenge, well, that secret is found in a relationship with Jesus Christ. A relationship that she shared with her son, Anthony. You see, Mrs. Walker was able to leave justice to the authorities and treat the young man who killed her son like that because she knows that love and forgiveness of the Lord Jesus Christ. She knows that love and forgiveness.